The Disruptive Restaurateur Espresso Cast.
In today's socially connected and fast-paced world, you will want to succeed and stand out from the competition. Your host, Jonathan Butler, is an award-winning chef, restaurateur and author, and is known for shaking up the everyday within our highly competitive industry. Welcome to the Disruptive Restaurateur podcast.
Hello and welcome today to the Disruptive Restaurateur Espresso Cast. This is our first Espresso Cast. This is just going to be a quick, probably no more than 10 minute sort of sound bite. I'm going to do these a little bit more regularly to slot in between the sort of more long-term interviews that the longer sort of lasting interviews that we do here on the Disruptive Restaurateur. So we've not done an episode for a while. This is now going to start become much more regular as we sort of enter the new decade, 2020, and this is the first sort of podcast of the new decade as we sort of enter into 2020. And I thought I'd kick this one off with just talking very, very briefly about sort of what trends we might see over the next the next sort of 12 months and beyond, really, because I think the next decade is going to be really, really exciting, like the last decade was. From 2010 to up to 2020, we've had some major sort of ups and downs in the industry, let's be honest, and it's been really, really interesting to watch, and I think there's lots of great stuff that's come out of it, and we've had a few hurdles along the way, as it were. So what are going to be the trends of 2020, do I sort of think? And veganism, let's be honest, that's been massive, certainly over the last sort of few years. That's sort of seen some growth, I think, rapidly. Last year we saw some huge steps forward with the sort of vegan movement, and certainly if you listen back to the podcast I did quite a while back now with Louis Blake from Urbiton House, and how they've moved in such a short space of time, sort of over the last sort of 18 months or so, that they've now opened sort of into London as well. But veganism, just some interesting facts on veganism. Apparently, according to Deliveroo, Mondays and Wednesdays are the most popular days for going meat-free. I think probably meat-free Mondays, obviously one that's been more muted around sort of recently, but so obviously I've got also Wednesday as well. So you need something to think about with your menu. When I sort of talk to clients on the menu, one thing I do say is don't necessarily make it separate. They want to feel inclusive. Anybody who's going to eat it. In fact, you'll find that a lot of meat eaters will eat vegan dishes if they are, presented on the menu correctly. So think about how you product place them on the menu, and how you sort of interact. But I personally don't think it's a great idea to have a completely separate vegan menu that sits alongside your main menu. So I think you need to sort of integrate that. Another trend that I think is we're certainly, again, we've seen a big launch in the last sort of week of Brewdog has launched their first alcohol-free bar in London, and certainly alcohol-free is a non-alcoholic sort of products are again becoming more and more available. So it's almost the veganism and this becomes down to this lifestyle choices and healthier sort of choices. But what we're finding is younger diners, a younger sort of the younger market aren't drinking as much, and they want to see they want the options of those alternatives. I'm actually currently working with a client who is opening up a completely dry restaurant. So again, this is a huge opportunity in marketplace, and obviously with the likes of Seedlips and all these sort of different now sort of these distilled spirits that are available, there is some huge opportunities there to expand that. Sticking with that kind of idea of the younger sort of market, or the millennials as well, they're wanting to sort of enjoy these sort of experiences and that kind of sort of experience is still a huge area that you need to focus on, and need to really start to think about. And that's the visuality of experience is actually really quite important. And there's some research done that showed that around 71% of people, they won't share their experiences on social media unless the surroundings meet up to the quality of the food. So if you have great tasting food and great looking food, but your surroundings don't meet that, there's not that opportunity for them to create that really visual sort of picture so you can share it, then 71% of people won't share it. So that's a huge number. And so you've really got to start to think about, it's not just about what goes on the plate, it's not just about what you're delivering on that, and even in terms of the service, the whole visual surroundings is sort of really key. And so I think that more focus on that experience, more focus on the environment of the experience, and then there's also this return of sort of almost classical kind of dishes again to add into the experience. Even things like theatre cooking. We might even see whether we return to the 70s sweet trolley, I don't know, but there's certainly, again, people want to be able to really kind of feel part of the experience, and that is really sort of, so there's this movement back again. We're seeing some reviving of some real classic sort of dishes as well. So I think that's really, really sort of exciting. Can't get away from anywhere at the moment without sort of thinking about the sort of the environment and sustainability. So again, you've got to start to think about, certainly a purge on plastics. So again, are you sort of looking at your supply chain and obviously being able to sort of shout about your eco credentials, again, because that becomes more and more important to your diners. And certainly the other aspect is food waste. So you've got to start to think about your portion sizes, your manageability of your menu, because again, food waste is obviously a huge environmental issue. So you need to think about the food waste element, the purge on the plastics, try and move away from single-use plastics if possible. I know a lot of restaurants are sort of moving away from using cling film and things like that, and there's also a cost benefit there, and moving into sort of where they can actually use reusable plastic containers and things for food storage. So you've got to start to think about that, but being able to sort of shout about that adds to that element, and something really, really sort of exciting to sort of think about. Delivery is still a huge element of the restaurant scene, the food scene. That is expected to grow by another 17% over the next sort of 2 years, so 2020 through to 2022. That market alone in the UK is going to be worth in the region of £5 billion. So it's a huge area. It's not an area I'm excited about, I will be honest. I find it kind of almost it is a disruptor, which I know we're called the Disruptive Restaurateur podcast, but it's I personally feel it's detrimental to the experience side of things. You as a restaurateur, you want people to come into your business to taste your food, to get that experience, that element and everything else, and once you pass your product onto a delivery company, I think you lose that, and for me it's a little conflicting, but you've got to be aware of the market. A £5 billion marketplace is huge, so think about your product, think about how it can be refined to work well in the delivery market, and how you can make that, improve that, and really make it work for you, because I think that's where a lot of restaurateurs are failing, is that they're just sort of taking the dishes and yeah, we can do that, and off it goes. But I think actually what you've got to do is refine that element, that process, to get the delivery aspect working. And finally, let's say 10 minutes soon flies by, doesn't it? So finally, think about sort of family friendly dining. Quite interestingly enough, is millennials in the UK over the next sort of 5 years are going to make up 83% of the UK parent population, and that's really quite interesting, because millennials have eaten out more than their parents. They've grown up in that environment where they can the dining out is certainly more what they want to do more of, but they're going to become parents. So I think what they're going to be looking for is more adventurous kids menus. They're very adventurous in their food anyway. They've had all these influences and from around the world that have sort of hit high streets over the last sort of 10, 15 years, 20 years, and they're going to be the ones who are sort of going to want to be able to pass that on through to their kids. So they're going to want their kids to be more adventurous in their eating habits. So that's something you got to think about. So very, very quick fire. Hopefully you got something out of that. Let's say we're going to do more of these espresso casts, I'm going to call them, for the Disruptive Restaurateur. And I'm John Butler. Thank you very much. You can catch me on social media, on LinkedIn. Obviously we've got the Disruptive Restaurateur on the Facebook page. So come and find us. Come and get in contact and check me out. Thanks very much. Until next time.